Hawks are skilled hunters, no doubt. They're focused on tracking their prey, their talons ready to grip with ruthless precision. But Falcons? Falcons can dismember their prey mid-flight. Now don't worry, you haven't accidentally turned into some wildlife documentary. This is still very much the military show. The two birds of prey we're talking about in this video are the F-16 Fighting Falcon, one of NATO's finest, and the J-21 Jastreb, the first combat jet to be mass-produced in socialist Yugoslavia. But these two predators didn't just clash. They were thrust into NATO's very first combat engagement, a battle that would set the stage for the alliance's reign in the skies. And trust us, what happened then wasn't much of a fair fight. It was the Falcon showing the Hawk how a true apex predator hunts. Let's get into it. The year is 1992. The world is reeling from the fallout of the Cold War, but as the dust settles, new crises emerge. In the heart of Europe, Yugoslavia is on the brink of collapse. Tensions are boiling over, and what was once a unified federation is now a bloody battlefield. The international community watches as the violence escalates, prompting the United Nations to step in. In October 1992, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 781, a call for no-fly zones over Bosnian airspace. At the time, it seemed simple: prevent military flights, prevent further escalation. But as the months passed, it became clear that a no-fly zone wasn't enough. By April 1993, there were over 500 violations of this zone. That's right, 500 blatant attempts to ignore the rules, making the Bosnian skies look like a free-for-all. So the UN ratchets up the pressure. Thanks to Resolution 816, all flights were now off-limits in Bosnian airspace unless expressly authorized by the UN. But this time the UN didn't just want compliance, it wanted power, the kind of power that could control the situation. And so on April 12, 1993, Operation Deny Flight was born. NATO's jets soared into the skies above Bosnia, prepared to make the skies clear and secure once more, the mission to enforce the no-fly zone. However, as the operation went on, NATO would be tasked with an additional mission: to provide close air support for UN troops on the ground and, when necessary, strike at Bosnian Serb military positions and airfields. This was more than just a mission. It was a bold move that said, NATO is here and we aren't backing down. And this message was received loud and clear. During NATO's earlier monitoring phase, Operation Sky Monitor, unauthorized fixed-wing flights averaged about 20 per month. But under Deny Flight, that number dropped to just 3. The no-fly zone wasn't just a suggestion anymore. The sky above Bosnia was now NATO's turf. But then on February 28, 1994, the Bosnian Serbs decided to challenge that authority, a decision they would come to regret dearly. It's the early morning of Sunday, February 27th, and the air is thick with tension. The mission is set, and the Bosnian Serbs are getting briefed on it. You see, this isn't your typical sortie. Only volunteers are called upon for this mission, and these pilots don't even know where they're headed until the very last moment. But they do know that it's a high-risk mission that might cost them everything. Their commanders make that clear. "We may not come back from this," one of them says, as if echoing a prophecy that would soon come true. The 6 pilots hand-picked for this deadly task are Captain First Class Ranko Vukmirovic, the commander of the 28th Squadron, Captain First Class Zvezdan Pesic, Captain First Class Goran Zaric, Captain First Class Zlatko Makarovic, Captain First Class Zlatan Chernalic, and Major Uroš Studin. None of them have seen combat for a year, but there's no turning back now. They climb aboard a bus from Banja Luka, a city in Republika Srpska, to Udbina, a small village located in Krajina in Croatia at the time. It's almost 11 a.m. By the evening, they've arrived at the Udbina airfield. It's here that their fate will be sealed, at least for some of them. That fateful February 28th comes. As the clock strikes 6 a.m., the formation begins. 6 J-21 Jastreb jets roar to life, rising into the sky. They're followed shortly by 2 J-22 Oreo jets, with afterburners lighting up the morning haze. The Oreo was another Yugoslavian invention and another bird of prey, the eagle. But it's the Hawks that will experience the full force of a Falcon's wrath today. The eagles fled before they could be grabbed. The Hawks, the Jastreb J-21s, fly in a 2x2 formation. Vukmirovic and Zaric lead the way, followed by Makarovic and Pesic, with Chernalic and Studin bringing up the rear. It's a tight formation, a well-oiled machine heading towards its target. The target in question? The Brastvo factory, an industrial complex with a history that stretches deep into the region's roots. For decades, this factory has been the beating heart of the city of Novi Travnik, fueling the economy and providing livelihoods for thousands of workers. But that's not what makes it critical today. No, Brastvo is vital for another reason entirely: weapons. The factory had long been a secretive hub for military-grade manufacturing, and during the war, it was cranking out rocket launch tubes. But even more damning, the M87 Orkan multiple rocket systems still housed within its walls. These systems, with a range of over 25 miles, could hit targets deep into Bosnian Serb territory. If these rockets were left intact, they would be a powerful threat to Serbian positions, an outcome the Bosnian Serbs simply could not afford. So the Jastreb pilots are told the target is producing illegal weapons and contributing to the enemy's war machine. The factory has to be taken down, no matter the cost. But there was another reason why the Bosnian Serbs felt so brave as to strike despite the no-fly zone, making every inch of Bosnian airspace dangerous for unauthorized flights. We'll let Chernilich explain. Up until then, we've been flying, entering the no-fly zone, completing missions with both helicopters and aircraft, and no one had ever fired at us. That's right, according to him, NATO had always issued warnings they'd learned to ignore, but had never actually fired a shot. This time, however, was different. But the pilots had no way of knowing that. Every combat mission carried its risk, but NATO's interference was certainly not on their radar. Still, they aren't looking to tempt fate, so they keep low, skimming the landscape to avoid detection. We flew low, believing that this would make us harder to detect by the F-16s patrolling Bosnian airspace, Struden explained later on. But as they entered Bosnian airspace, their assumption proved to be a costly one. They were immediately spotted. Still, they continued their approach, closing in on their objective. As the factory comes into view, the pilots have no choice but to climb to 6,500 feet to execute the bombing run. Some 50 miles away, 2 F-16s monitoring the skies are alerted. The 2 F-16s on patrol that morning were part of the 526th Fighter Squadron, known as the Black Knights, stationed at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. The Knight 25 was piloted by Captain Steve Yogi Allen, while Colonel John Jace Meyer piloted Knight 26. Initially, Allen and Meyer were conducting a close air support training mission near Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. However, their routine exercise quickly turned into a high-stakes operation when those 6 unidentified radar contacts entered the no-fly zone over Bosnia. Without hesitation, the 2 pilots shifted course, leaving their original mission behind. Meanwhile, 2 other F-16s from the 526th, Black 3 and Black 4, piloted by Captains Bob Wilbur Wright and Scott O'Grady, were also redirected to intercept the intruding aircraft. The patrol had originally been stationed over Mostar, but upon receiving the alert from AWACS at 6:35 a.m., they immediately abandoned their designated patrol zone and headed northwest to challenge the unknown contacts. By the time the jets were in pursuit, the AWACS had already issued 2 warnings for the Bosnian Serb aircraft to land or leave the no-fly zone. However, the Jastreb pilots, unable to receive the NATO frequencies due to their radio limitations, were unaware of the attempts to communicate. But this doesn't mean the Bosnian Serbs were unaware of NATO's jets. No, the alliance made its presence very much known. The first warning came from the ground. "American aircraft ahead of you," a voice crackled through the radio, cutting through the tension. But the Jastreb pilots didn't need to look twice. They could already see the trails of 2 F-16s cutting through the air fast and confident, heading straight toward them. The 2 F-16s zipped through the Jastreb formation at breakneck speed, creating a brief shockwave of turbulence as they pass. But they don't attack. It's as if they're giving the Jastreb pilots a chance, a moment to reconsider, to turn back, to leave the no-fly zone and avoid a confrontation, to avoid the wrath of the Falcon. For a fleeting second, the Jastreb pilots feel the tension rise. Could this be a warning? The Americans haven't fired, haven't engaged, but their presence is unmistakable. They're making it clear. The choice is yours. But Vukmirovich's voice cuts through the silence. "I see them. Let's go." With the target locked in, the decision was almost made for them. Push forward, keep flying, and complete the mission. The Jastrebs, while aging and lacking modern targeting systems, still had their way of getting the job done. The pilots relied on their optical sight and the trust in their aircraft's bomb delivery systems for it. As the factory came into view, it was time. The Jastreb jets dropped their 550-pound bombs, targeting from multiple angles to maximize the damage. The bombs hit with precision, striking the factory from different directions, leaving the structure engulfed in flames. "We're good to go," one of the pilots murmurs. "The job is done." But what these pilots fail to realize is that the real challenge is just beginning. Earlier, the Jastreb pilots were given a choice: land or exit the no-fly zone or be engaged. The moment those bombs hit the factory, however, it became unmistakably clear that they had crossed the line. The target was struck, and NATO's rules of engagement kicked into action. With the violation complete, the Combined Air Operations Center swiftly authorized the F-16s to engage, clearing them to act on the orders. "You're cleared to engage," was all the F-16 pilots needed to hear. NATO's patience had run out, and now the Jastrebs will be feeling the full weight of their defiance. Blissfully unaware of their impending doom, the Jastreb pilots started to make their way back to base, but the American jets were already in pursuit, their engines roaring behind them. The chase had begun, and the Hawks were hopelessly outmatched. It's now 6:45 a.m., and Wright is the first to strike. His F-16 surges forward, missiles armed and ready. He has a lock on one of the Jastrebs, and with a confident press of the button, the missile flies away. "Fox 3, he calls, as the AIM-120 AMRAAM speeds off, homing in on its target. The missile tears through the air, and seconds later, an explosion lights up the sky. Chernilek felt it before he saw it. A flash, a jolt, and then the realization that something had gone horribly wrong. His aircraft shuddered as the missile made its impact. For a moment, he wasn't sure what had happened. The force of the explosion made it feel like he'd been hit from behind, but no, he was still flying. But then he saw the devastation firsthand. His wingman's plane was gone in a brilliant burst of fire. The explosion took out most of the left wing, tearing it apart in a split second. "The Americans are on our tail," Chernilek shouts, as he realizes the situation is now dire. "Scatter! Run!" The remaining 5 Jastrebs break formation, each pilot frantically trying to outmaneuver the F-16s, but the NATO jets are simply too fast, too agile. The Jastrebs can run, but there's nowhere to hide. Chernilek dives low, skimming the terrain, hoping the hills will give him some cover. He can feel an F-16 hot on his tail, the sound of its engines growing louder with every passing second. "He's on me! He's not letting up!" he yells, his heart pounding. At that moment, the pursuit shifts gears. O'Grady, who has been flying high above, drops into the fray. Without hesitation, O'Grady fires the AIM-9M Sidewinder, a heat-seeking missile that homes in on the hot exhaust of Chernilek's jet. But thanks to electrical transmission wires Chernilek flies past, the missile explodes near his jet's tail. Still, he feels the impact immediately. The tail is torn apart. The blast was so close it nearly sent him into an uncontrolled spin. "I'm hit," Chernilek shouts, fighting to keep control of the plane. But his radio is dead, and all he can do now is fly as fast and as low as he can, praying that he can make it to the base. But even though the F-16s had launched their missiles and were getting hits, they weren't done. They stayed on Chernilek's tail, relentless in their pursuit. Alone, crippled, and with no communication, Chernilek pushes his aircraft toward the only hope he has left, the base in Udbina. He's running low on fuel, barely keeping the plane in the air. Each minute feels like a countdown. Then, just when he thinks his time has run out, he sees the F-16s pulling away. Chernilek can't believe it. He's been spared. For now. But not all of his comrades are as lucky. Back in the valley, Makarovich and his wingman push their aircraft to the limit. Their only hope is the cover of the rugged terrain. But the F-16 isn't far behind, and it's relentless. Right locks on. "Fox 3 is all you can hear. The AMRAAM missile is a streak of death, locking onto its target. Makarovich doesn't even see it coming. All he sees is a fiery burst tearing through the air, a ball of flame that was once his wingman's jet. "Pesich is down," he cries out. Makarovich pulls hard on the stick, trying to outmaneuver the fury on his tail, but the F-16 isn't done. A second missile screams towards him. The impact is a roar of fire. "I'm hit! I'm on fire!" Makarovich shouts, but the words are drowned by the explosion. He fights to keep control, the flames licking at his cockpit, but the heat is unbearable. Desperation drives him and he pulls the ejection handle. The canopy blows off and the wind howls past him. Below, the F-16 flies past, a shadow in the smoke. The F-16 pilots swap positions. One of them is already lining up for another shot. It seems that the hunt has only just begun. The Hawks should have known better than to openly defy the Falcons. Vukmirovich and Zarich become well aware of this as they hear their comrades fall one by one, and they seem to be next. "Behind us!" Vukmirovich shouts, but it's already too late. The F-16's engine screams and the missiles lock on. He turns hard trying to outmaneuver the incoming missile, but there's no escape. It explodes near his wing, a flash of heat and sound, but somehow, miraculously, he's still flying. "He's turning away!" Vukmirovich breathes, wide-eyed. As the F-16s pull back for a refuel, the remaining J-21s get a brief breath, but the fight's far from over. The silence is shattered by the roar of engines. Vukmirovich looks back. His stomach drops as 2 F-16s are heading their way. With no time to waste, the J-21s break formation, diving low into the valleys, their wings skimming the treetops. The F-16s track their every move, a constant shadow in the sky. Desperation sets in. "Follow me," Vukmirovich orders. He turns, heading straight for a cliff at maximum speed. Zarich stays close behind, but the ground is closing in fast. "Pull up," Vukmirovich yells, heart hammering. The ground rushes up like a tidal wave, but just as they pull up, the earth comes too quickly. Vukmirovich's jet grazes the ground, erupting in a fireball. There's a reason this is such a high-risk maneuver. Zarich watches, horrified, hoping he'll see a parachute, but it never comes. With no time to process, Zarich dives, trying to shake the F-16s, but they're still on him. Too close, their engines howling with predatory instinct. "Fox 2, a voice roars in one of the Falcons. The missile strikes and Zarich's tail erupts into flames. Just like that, his jet is gone. He ejects, but it's too late. The fireball consumes him before he even hits the ground. "Splash 1, the F-16 pilot confirms coldly. The enemy aircraft has been destroyed. Not one, but 5 of them. The one remaining, it's Chernilek. His plane is battered, limping back towards safety, but it's still flying. He keeps his eyes glued to the gauges, his thoughts racing as he struggles to keep his damaged aircraft in the air. The F-16s leave the wreckage behind, moving swiftly toward the last remaining Jastreb, now flying low over the countryside. Chernolich feels them before he sees them, the unmistakable roar of the American fighter. His heart slams in his chest and dread hits him like a ton of bricks. As he would explain later, he thought he only had one option: pull up, get altitude, eject before he's gone. But just as he gets ready to eject, the F-16 pulls up alongside Chernolich's damaged jet, matching his speed with eerie precision. The two pilots are locked in a surreal, silent moment. Chernolich's eyes lock with the enemy pilots, disbelief flooding his veins. Not knowing what to do, Chernolich waves his wings, and then the unimaginable happens. The American pilot does the wing wave back, a salute, if you will. He just turned around and left, Chernolich later explained, leaving him stunned. He was the only one to return to safety in his aircraft. The destruction of 5 Jastrebs was credited to the sharp eyes and deadly precision of 2 US pilots, Wright and Allen. Wright, flying the F-16 C-40, took out 3 Jastrebs on his own, a remarkable feat. In fact, Wright's triple victory made him the first US pilot to score a triple kill since the Korean War, cementing his place in combat history. His wingman, Scott O'Grady, also proved lethal. Piloting his F-16 C-40, he used an AIM-9 Sidewinder to down another Jastreb, further adding to the destruction. The fall of the 5th Jastreb, Vukmirovich's one, wasn't attributed to the F-16 pilot since it resulted from a failed low-level escape. This ferocious fight later came to be known as the Banja Luka incident. Interestingly, the surviving Jastreb pilots were reportedly instructed to remain silent about the incident. The names of the fallen pilots were never officially released and their identities were never publicly acknowledged by any warring faction. However, we now know that 3 pilots managed to survive the carnage. Studin and Makarovich were lucky enough to eject, but the true miracle of the day was Chernolich, who also shared his story in 2015 after enough time had passed. When asked how he felt about the pilot who had fired at him, he gave a surprising response. "Oh, there are no hard feelings. They had their mission, I had mine. That's just how it is," he said. His words carried no bitterness, no anger, only the understanding of a soldier who had faced death and lived to tell the tale. Perhaps that's why he was allowed to live in the first place. Chernolich even made a joke. "It's my fault I didn't have a plane equal to his. Then we'd see how things would go," he said, laughing. And let us tell you, he was right about the first part. The Hawk was simply no match for the Falcon. The Falcon had a max speed of 1,500 miles per hour, nearly 3 times faster than the Jastreb's 510 miles per hour. It flew higher, 50,000 feet versus 39,000 feet. It also climbed drastically faster, up to 55,000 feet per minute versus 4,100 feet per minute. Plus, the Jastreb's 3 machine guns and unguided rockets were no match for the F-16's precision-guided munitions, superior radar, and advanced avionics. Chernolich's joke was right. This was never a fair fight. But fairness had nothing to do with it. The Jastreb pilots knowingly broke the no-fly zone, gambling their lives in outdated jets against the world's most advanced fighters. They weren't outmaneuvered, they were outmatched from the start. But do you agree with Chernolich? Would more advanced technology truly make a difference? Or would the F-16 pilot's skills and strategy always come out on top? Share your thoughts in the comments below.